When I first married Claire, I truly believed I had found the one person who would walk beside me through every hardship, every trial, every storm life could possibly throw at me. But what I didn't know was that her loyalty was as thin as her patience, and her love depended only on the size of a bank account. I wasn't rich when we got married, far from it. I was an ambitious man with dreams bigger than my paycheck, working long hours at a job that barely paid the bills, coming home exhausted but still hopeful that one day my efforts would pay off. Claire, however, was never satisfied. At first, her remarks were subtle, little digs at my worn-out shoes or the old car that rattled like a tin can on the highway, but over time they became sharper, crueler, and filled with venom. "You'll never be anything," she once told me, her voice dripping with disdain as she looked at the bills piled on the table. "I should have married someone successful, someone who could actually give me the life I deserve. You're nobody, and you'll always be nobody." Those words burned into my soul like acid. And though I tried to shrug them off, pretending that they didn't cut as deep as they did, the truth is they haunted me every night as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if she was right, wondering if I truly was destined to remain a failure in her eyes. But the thing about being underestimated, about being humiliated by the person you love most, is that it ignites something inside you, a fire so intense it refuses to go out until you prove them wrong, until you rise from the ashes and make them choke on every cruel word they ever spat in your face. I kept working, I kept grinding. I took jobs nobody else wanted. I taught myself skills at night when Claire was out with her friends, laughing at men who had what I couldn't yet provide. And slowly, brick by brick, I began building something that was mine. She didn't see it at first, or maybe she didn't want to, because in her mind, I was already written off, dismissed as nothing more than a loser she was stuck with until something better came along. And something better, at least in her eyes, eventually did come along. A man named Eric. Tall, polished, a lawyer with a shiny watch and a brand new car. The kind of man who could buy her expensive dinners and whisk her off to weekends in the city. I'll never forget the night she came home, her perfume still clinging to her clothes, her lips curled in that smug smile as she told me she was leaving, that she had found someone who could finally give her the life she deserved, someone worthy of her. I didn't beg, I didn't cry, though every fiber of my being wanted to collapse under the weight of betrayal. Instead, I stood there, silently, as she packed her bags, her laughter echoing in the empty space of our apartment as if mocking the very air I breathed. "You'll never make it," she sneered before slamming the door shut behind her. "You'll always be nothing." And just like that, she was gone, leaving me with nothing but the shards of a broken marriage and a fire raging so fiercely inside me that it threatened to consume me whole. But instead of letting it destroy me, I let it fuel me. I let every insult, every moment of humiliation, every time she laughed in my face become the very reason I would succeed. And succeed I did. Over the next 5 years, I climbed from the gutter she left me in to a place she could never have imagined. I built my own business from scratch, turned long nights into profitable ventures, invested smartly when others doubted me, and little by little, I became the man she swore I could never be. My company grew, my wealth multiplied, and suddenly, the man she once ridiculed as nobody was shaking hands with people she could only dream of meeting, driving cars she once drooled over in magazines, living in a house bigger than anything her new husband Eric could ever afford. But the sweetest part of it all wasn't the money, wasn't the recognition or the success. It was knowing that one day, inevitably, she would see me again. And when she did, the look on her face would be worth every sleepless night, every insult, every ounce of pain she had inflicted. Because I wasn't planning on just showing her I had made it. I was planning on making her regret ever underestimating me, regret ever laughing at me, regret ever thinking I was nobody. Revenge wasn't just a passing thought anymore. It was my purpose, and soon it would be her reality.
Success changes people, but in my case, it didn't make me arrogant. It made me sharper, colder, more deliberate with every move I made. I remembered every word Claire ever threw at me, every insult she spat when she thought she was upgrading her life by leaving me, and I carried those words like weights strapped to my chest until the day I realized they had transformed into armor. My business had grown beyond what I once thought possible. I wasn't just earning a comfortable living. I was running a thriving company in the tech sector, the kind of business Claire used to roll her eyes at when I stayed up late coding or researching in the dark, whispering under her breath that I was wasting my time. Funny how those wasted hours turned into contracts with major firms, into deals that put my name on the map, into financial independence she could only dream of. I moved into a home that overlooked the city skyline, a view that reminded me every morning that I had climbed higher than she ever believed I could. And then, as fate would have it, Claire reappeared in my life, not by accident, but because failure seemed to cling to her like perfume that had gone sour. Eric, the shiny lawyer she left me for, wasn't so shiny anymore. I heard through whispers in mutual circles that his career had stagnated, that debts were piling up, that his perfect life with Claire was unraveling. They were struggling, and when people struggle, they look for lifelines. One evening, at a corporate gala I had been invited to, I saw her again. She was wearing a dress that probably cost more than Eric could afford. Her makeup flawless, her smile rehearsed, but I could see it. The tiny cracks around her eyes, the desperation hidden behind the gloss. She hadn't expected me to be there, and when her gaze landed on me, she froze. For a moment, her lips parted in disbelief as if her brain couldn't reconcile the man standing before her in a tailored suit, surrounded by colleagues who admired me, with the nobody she once mocked. I didn't approach her immediately, no. I let her stew in that cocktail of shock and envy, let her watch as I laughed with people she'd kill to impress, let her eyes linger on the watch on my wrist and the confidence in my stride. She came to me, eventually, like I knew she would. "Daniel," she said, her voice trembling slightly, though she tried to mask it with that same smug tone I remembered. "Wow, you look different. Different." That was the best she could manage. I smiled politely, as if I was trying to recall her name, as if she were just another face from the past, not the woman who once shattered me. "Claire," I said evenly, "it's been a long time." She laughed lightly, nervously, as though the years hadn't happened, as though she hadn't left me in pieces. "You've, done well for yourself." "Better than well," I replied, locking eyes with her. "But you already knew I would, didn't you?" That wiped the fake smile right off her face. For the rest of the evening, she hovered near me, looking for chances to engage, to rekindle some thread of connection. I gave her just enough attention to keep her hooked, but never enough to satisfy her, treating her like she was an afterthought in a room where I was the center of gravity. And I knew then, my moment had arrived. The woman who had once laughed at me, who had called me nothing, was now circling back, hungry for the success she abandoned. But I wasn't going to hand her forgiveness. I wasn't going to let her waltz back into my life as though her betrayal hadn't built the very foundation I stood on now. No, I was going to savor this. Revenge, after all, isn't something you rush. It's something you serve slowly, deliberately, until every bite is bitter enough to choke on. And Claire had only just taken the first taste. After that gala, I knew Claire wouldn't stay away. People like her never do. Pride keeps them from admitting mistakes, but desperation drives them to circle the very people they once discarded. And sure enough, just a week later, I got a message on LinkedIn of all places. Professional, polite, almost innocent in tone. "It was great seeing you again. Would love to catch up properly sometime." I stared at it for a good 5 minutes, smirking. Catch up. As if she hadn't spit on everything I was when she left. As if the years she spent living the better life she chose didn't exist. I didn't respond right away. I waited 2 days, just enough for her to wonder if I would reply at all, and finally sent back a short, detached, "Sure, I'll let you know when I have time." No exclamation marks, no warmth. Just enough to open the door and keep her waiting. A week later, we met for coffee. I chose the location carefully. An upscale cafe in the financial district filled with people in tailored suits, laptops open, deals being made. A place where I belonged and where she would feel like an outsider. When she walked in, I noticed how hard she was trying. Perfect hair, expensive but slightly dated clothes, a smile that strained to look effortless. She sat across from me, eyes scanning me the way someone examines a puzzle they can't quite solve. "Daniel," she said softly, I can't get over how much you've changed. You're successful now, confident." I leaned back, letting her words roll over me like smoke I didn't care to inhale. "Success changes things," I said casually, sipping my coffee, "but it doesn't erase the past." Her eyes flickered, a tiny crack in the polished facade. She launched into her story then, how things with Eric weren't what she thought they would be, how he had become bitter and lazy, how life hadn't turned into the fairy tale she'd expected. She didn't say the words, but I heard them anyway. She regretted leaving me. Every sigh, every glance at me as though I was the life raft she had been stupid enough to let go of, screamed regret, and I enjoyed every second of it. "Sometimes," I said carefully, "we make choices we have to live with." She nodded, biting her lip, her hands twisting slightly in her lap. "I know. I made mistakes, Daniel." Mistakes. That was her word for it. Not betrayal, not cruelty, not mocking me while she walked away with another man. Just mistakes. I smiled, not with kindness, but with the satisfaction of knowing I held all the power now. She wanted me back, or at least the version of me she had once dismissed. She wanted the stability, the success, the prestige. But all she was going to get was the game I was about to play. I invited her to one of my company's events a week later. She accepted eagerly, showing up at my side like we were some kind of power couple. I introduced her to people, powerful people, without ever acknowledging our history, letting her bask in my spotlight while she tried desperately to reclaim relevance. But every time she smiled at me, every time she touched my arm, thinking she was weaving her way back into my life, I remembered the nights she mocked me for dreaming, the morning she packed her bags and told me I wasn't good enough. I wasn't going to forgive that. I wasn't going to give her the redemption she was looking for. No, I was going to let her believe she had a chance, and then I was going to take it away in the cruelest, most beautiful way possible. Because sometimes revenge isn't about striking hard. It's about letting them climb back up the ladder, rung by rung, until they think they've made it back into your world, before you kick it out from under them and watch them fall all over again. Claire was already on the ladder, and I was already smiling at the thought of her fall. Claire began inserting herself into my life more and more, always under the guise of just wanting to reconnect. She'd text me in the evenings, send me photos of dinners she cooked just for herself, or casually suggest we should have a meal together sometime. I allowed it, always careful to respond just enough to keep her hooked, but never enough to satisfy her. She was chasing me now, and the irony was intoxicating. At work, I was negotiating multi-million-dollar contracts, meeting investors, traveling to other states to expand the company's influence. My calendar was packed, my phone buzzing constantly with opportunities. Yet here was Claire acting like the world stopped if I didn't text her back within an hour. One evening, I agreed to dinner. I chose the restaurant deliberately, an exclusive place with a month-long waiting list, the kind of establishment people brag about just getting into. When we arrived, she looked around wide-eyed, almost like the younger Claire I used to know, before arrogance and selfishness hardened her. She leaned forward across the table, her hand brushing mine. "Daniel, I can't tell you how much I regret what happened between us. You've become everything I always believed you could be." I nearly laughed. Believed in me? She had ridiculed me, humiliated me, told me I was wasting my life. I played along, nodding, letting her pour her heart out, pretending to be touched by her words. But inside, I was ice. I wasn't building a bridge back to her. I was laying the foundation for her downfall. After that dinner, she grew bolder. She began calling me late at night, sometimes after drinking, confessing how miserable her marriage had become, how Eric was nothing like she thought he would be. She complained about how he resented her, how he wasn't ambitious, how their house felt like a cage. She told me she missed us. Each confession was a gift, every detail painting her as the selfish, restless person she had always been. I listened patiently, like a confidant, while carefully cataloging her words. It wasn't enough to reject her, No, I wanted her desperation to be exposed, for her mask to be ripped away in front of everyone who mattered to her. So, I began to lay the trap. At the next corporate event, I invited not just Claire, but also Eric. She didn't know, of course. When she arrived, smiling and clinging to my arm, her face drained of color as she spotted her husband standing in the corner, confused and clearly uncomfortable in the lavish surroundings. I greeted Eric warmly, shaking his hand like an old friend, introducing him to my colleagues. Claire stood there frozen, trying to hide the panic in her eyes. All night, I made sure to give Eric the attention Claire had expected for herself. I spoke about business, about resilience, about the grind that builds real success. I watched as Eric listened, visibly aware of the man Claire had thrown away, visibly aware of the gulf between us. And I could see the cracks forming. Claire glaring at him, Eric glaring back, their fragile facade breaking apart in front of my guests. When the night ended, she pulled me aside, her voice low and frantic. "Why would you invite him? You embarrassed me." I smiled, meeting her eyes with a calm that only fueled her frustration. "You embarrassed yourself, Claire, years ago when you left me for him. This is just the aftermath." She didn't know what to say. She stammered, trying to explain, but I didn't need explanations anymore. The beauty of revenge isn't in shouting your victory, it's in silence, in watching them unravel while you stand untouchable. And Claire was unraveling faster than I had even imagined. After that night, Claire couldn't hide her obsession anymore. She called me constantly, sometimes 3 or 4 times a day, sending long, emotional messages about how she made the biggest mistake of her life, how she had chosen the wrong man, how she had thrown away the only person who ever truly cared for her. She begged me to see her again, to talk, to forgive her. Meanwhile, Eric had grown distant from her, and I knew why, because I had made sure every seed of doubt was planted in his head. At the event, I had deliberately mentioned stories of our past, carefully worded anecdotes about my early struggles, making them sound like victories Claire and I had shared together. The look on Eric's face said everything. He realized his wife had once stood by me, only to discard me, and that knowledge was now poisoning him. I knew their home life was collapsing because Claire confided in me endlessly. "He doesn't even look at me anymore," she whispered one night over the phone, her voice breaking. "He doesn't touch me. He doesn't talk to me." I let a pause linger before answering, calm and detached. "Maybe he finally sees you for who you really are." That silence on the other end was sweeter than any declaration of victory. I never needed to shout, never needed to humiliate her directly. Their marriage was crumbling under the weight of her own choices, and all I had to do was watch. But I wasn't done. I wanted the world, the same people who once watched her mock me, to see her downfall. I arranged another gala, this one larger, filled with influential partners, investors, and socialites. I made sure Claire and Eric were both invited again. Claire came dressed in an expensive gown, trying desperately to reclaim some dignity, while Eric trailed behind her, shoulders slumped. During the evening, I gave a speech, thanking the people who supported me, talking about perseverance and loyalty. Then, deliberately, I looked at Claire. Our eyes locked as I said, "And to those who doubted me, who ridiculed me when I was nothing, I owe you thanks as well. Because without that fire, without that betrayal, I wouldn't have become who I am today." The room erupted in applause, but Claire's face turned pale, her forced smile trembling, as guests glanced between us, whispers spreading like wildfire. Eric didn't even bother pretending. He set his drink down and walked out, leaving her standing alone. The humiliation was complete. That night, she cornered me outside, her voice shaking with rage and desperation. "You think this makes you better than me? You think this erases the years I wasted?" I leaned close, my voice low and steady. "No, Claire, this doesn't erase anything. It just shows everyone what you really are. And now you have to live with it." She broke then, tears streaming down her face, the proud, cruel woman who once laughed at me, now reduced to nothing. She begged again for forgiveness, for another chance, but I turned and walked away, leaving her in the shadows of her own ruin. My revenge wasn't in taking her back or shouting at her. It was in success, in dignity, in making her feel the weight of every word she once used to crush me. And as I drove away that night, the city lights glowing in the distance, I realized something even more powerful. I didn't need her downfall to validate me anymore. I had already won. By the time Claire's marriage officially collapsed, the entire city seemed to know. Word spread quickly in circles that mattered. Eric had filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences, and Claire had been left with little more than the clothes she wore to court. Their assets, most of them his, were stripped away, and the glamorous life she had once paraded in front of me crumbled into dust. People whispered about her at parties, the same way they once whispered about me. But now the ridicule was directed at her. That was the irony. I no longer cared for their judgment, but she lived for it. And without their approval, she was hollow. She reached out again, this time not with anger, but with pathetic humility. She asked if we could meet for coffee, just to talk. Out of curiosity, I agreed. She looked older when I saw her. Not in years, but in spirit. Her once perfect smile was forced, her voice shaky. She tried to reminisce, to pull on the threads of our past, hoping I'd catch one and unravel into the man who once adored her. But I wasn't that man anymore. I listened, calm, patient, letting her pour out her regrets, her apologies, her declarations of love. When she finished, eyes glassy with desperation, I leaned forward and said quietly, "Claire, I don't hate you anymore, but I also don't love you. You were part of my past, and that's where you'll stay." Her face twisted as if those words were sharper than any insult. She reached for my hand, but I pulled away, stood, and left her sitting in that cafe, surrounded by strangers who didn't know her story, but could sense her shame. Walking out, I felt lighter. The revenge had already been delivered, not in cruelty, but in the fact that I no longer needed her. The boy she mocked as a failure was gone, replaced by a man who had built something she could never touch. My success wasn't about showing her she was wrong. It was about proving to myself that I was right to never give up. I had endured, I had risen, and now I had peace. Later that year, I met someone new. Not out of spite, not out of revenge, but out of genuine connection. She didn't care about my money, my status, or the story of how I'd been betrayed. She cared about me. For the first time in years, I felt free of Claire's shadow. And when I saw Claire again, months later, passing on the street with her head down, I didn't feel anger or triumph. I felt nothing. And that was the greatest victory of all.